Good afternoon, Semper Paratus. Welcome to the channel. Welcome back if you've been here before, or welcome for the first time if you've never seen this before. Then this could be a strange experience for you, and I apologize in advance. This is the SitRep. I'm Gads, and you're watching Ragnarok Survival. It's been a minute since I've done a SitRep. I understand that. For those who following along, you'd know that I went overseas for a minute. That is a couple of weeks. I got man flu quite bad. I recovered from that. Then I got another head cold after that. I used to think I was the kind of person who was like impervious to illnesses. And then I got a small human being who has this habit of like ejecting snot right in your face, like right into your open mouth at weird times. So yeah, that doesn't help. Anyway, I lost my voice a little bit, and I thought it would be a shitty sit rep if I was to try and do this with no voice. So I thought I'd wait till my voice had recovered a little bit until you could hear the smooth, dulcet tones of me back in your ear holes or your face eyeball holes. If you're watching this on Instagram, if you're watching this on YouTube, on Rumble, or if you're listening to the audio version after the fact, once I upload it. And I'm in a new office as well. I changed my office space. I'm just looking at it at the YouTube now. I need to like sort my camera out and try and bring it in a little bit. Instagram, you look fine. You look beautiful, Instagram. New studio, revamped, new pad, looks the goods, says Uhtred, son of Uhtred. Yes, thank you. I've been thinking about what to put there. I actually do have another bag here, and I'm about to go traveling tomorrow, so I had to take that bag down. But that's my rough equipment sort of section. This is my knowledge and fine things section with my axe. Anyway, yeah, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. This, for those who haven't joined me before, this is where I go through interesting stories that people have sent through to me or that I've come across in the media / alternative media sources. And we look at it from the perspective of prepping, as in getting ourselves better prepared for the uncertain future, although I would argue that it's probably becoming a little bit more certain now. By the way, if it looks like I'm sort of like chilly, it's really fucking cold in this room. So it is chilly here. Let's jump right into it. First one that I'm going to talk about today is South Africa. So a couple of very interesting things coming out of South Africa at the moment. One being their electrical issues, which I'll touch on in a sec, and the other one is water. So they've just passed, I guess it's a law where they've basically said if companies or entities do not have a certain amount of people within that entity that have a certain type of skin color or tone, then you're not going to get water, or you're going to get restricted water, or you're going to get charged more for your water, which, if I say it like that, it sounds pretty racist, right? But it's against white people, so, it's fine. It's okay. You're allowed to be racist against white people. Those whiteys. I don't identify as white. So this has obviously got some pretty large impacts, and it's pretty. I look at this sort of stuff and I get terrified, because water is one of those things that I'm like, don't fuck with people's water. Like, do not mess with water. It's such a fundamental to life. It's going to impact business. It's going to impact a whole heap of things. Yeah. And it's all in the name of equality, obviously. The issue I think that they might face with this, where it actually starts to play out larger unintended consequences, or maybe intended consequences, if we want to put our... Oh dear. Sorry, Instagram. We're back. I haven't set this up very well yet. If we want to put our tinfoil hat on for a second and think about this, maybe this is actually targeting the food system within the country. So that's my little conspiracy theory for the day. But if you affect the water against people who are paler in their skin tone, then and you look at who the main farmers are in South Africa, it is still the people who have paler skin tones. So you're essentially going to say water's going to cost you more, or you're not going to get as much water, which means food will either cost more or food will not be available. So again, another attack on the food system. And I like to point out these attacks on the food system. I use the word attack. I'm not necessarily saying, I did have the tinfoil hat on, I'm not necessarily saying that there is a cabal of evil Illuminati lizard people who are out there targeting our food system, although there might be. Okay, I'm not saying there's not either. I don't know. I've never seen a lizard person personally, but some people swear by it. All I'm saying is that attacks, as in either meant to be or accidental or second or third order effects of or unintended consequences of these choices that people are making, that at the end result is the same. It ends up that food is going to be less available and will cost more. So really interesting stuff that's coming out of Africa, South Africa there, on top of obviously their crisis with their energy. I got sent this story originally, I want to say maybe a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, by my main source on Instagram, who sends me a lot of stuff, a lot of really good stuff. But I did see a story on this morning that they had given it the green light. So it is actually happening. I've got another South African story here. Right, here it is. Cholera makes a comeback in South Africa due to lack of reliable electricity. So I said this about the electrical issues that they're having. And I was talking to someone in a cafe, a local cafe here, who's a local person. And they were talking about down with the system and or blaming basically corporate people and greed within rich people, because there is that kind of like divide in our town. And I said, I get you there, but my gripe's really with government, not necessarily rich people. I mean, rich people are rich people, usually for a reason, not always a good reason, but a lot of them do in some way earn that money. Anyway, we get to this point where we're talking about faults in society and how things come down, and I talked about electricity, and he kind of went, "Oh, it doesn't really matter that much," and I was like, "Bro, if the lights went out and did not come on again, then like I think conservatively 60% of Earth, maybe not Earth, all right, 60% of developed countries would probably die off within 6 months. That's sounds pretty wild to people, but I'm basing that off somebody who's actually studied this sort of stuff, and their report said 90% within 12 months. So could happen. Electricity, big deal. So watching this South African debacle with quite a bit of interest, because it's not like South Africa is a third world nation. This is not some backwater. This is not some failed state, although it's really heading towards failed state at this point. This is a country that I would say has many similarities to a place like Australia, to a place like the US, to other nations. I wouldn't say it's quite up there, but there are a lot of similarities, and there are a lot of things that if we make the wrong choices, we too could fall into this sort of trap. So the other part of it is that electricity is quite often, and I pointed this out to my friend, without electricity, most of our town is okay that we have gravity fed water, but that's a town. That's a small town. We're not the majority of Australians. The majority of Australians live in cities. The majority of Australians are utterly reliant on stable grid fed electricity for water to come out of their taps. That being that, a lot of people don't think about this. Water doesn't just magically come out of the taps. It's forced in there, or at least if you think about a high rise, there's no where's the gravity coming from? Oh, well, maybe they've got tanks on the roof. Well, they have to get the water up there somehow, don't they? And it's usually pumped with electricity. And I say usually as in the vast, vast majority of times, it will be pumped up there with electricity. So no electricity, no water. And that's what South Africa is looking at the moment with this cholera outbreak. Again, it's these second, third order effects that there's the news, and you can look at it and you go, oh yeah, power outages, that's bad. People aren't going to be able to charge their phones or watch the news at night or play Xbox or something. Oh well, no, it's actually a lot more serious than that. Not to mention that these rolling brownouts, blackouts, and in some parts of South Africa, utter blackout, like they've just got no power, are starting to increase the violence within that society. So we're seeing like a huge increase in civil unrest in South Africa at the moment, which I would expect to see in any country. If we lost our power, I couldn't see Australians just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. It's kind of bad, I guess, but guess we'll just wait for the government to come help us. Don't wait for the government to come help you. Spoiler alert. All right, let's jump into something else. I don't have a lot of time, by the way, on this one, so it's going to be a relatively quick one, maybe half an hour. Australia, the US, and Ukraine are discussing sending 41 Royal Australian Air Force F-18 Hornets to Kiev. Do you remember this time where they were like 100% sending planes of any sort to Ukraine? That would be an act of war, and there's no way we're going to do that. And you just like, I'm noticing how much they're just going like, oh, and now we'll send this, and now we'll send this, and now we'll send this. The FA-18s, I apologize about the coughing, by the way. The FA-18s are about to be binned in Australia, sort of. Like they're destined for the scrap heap here. They're older planes now. We're looking to the future. We're buying in on the next greatest piece of shit that's come out, and putting all our dollaroos into that. So instead of just, I don't know, recycling the F-18s or selling them, we're going to give them away to the Ukraine. Interesting stuff there. The reason I point out Ukraine stuff, I mean, this has to do with Australia. Obviously, we're giving, we are giving devices of war into a war. And so that I mean, it's not like it was a grey area here. We're very much on one side, as in Australia, the government, and many, many sheeple and NPCs within Australia also on this side of, yes, we must stand up for Ukraine, which if you've got an opinion on that's your opinion, you keep it. It bemuses me a little bit. I'm like, I'm not sure why, or, we should be even getting involved in this entire thing. But certainly when we're looking at the consequences that this might develop into, if we continue to push down into a war between these two places, really what we're looking at is a war, a quasi-war or a de facto war between NATO and Russia. These are nuclear-armed forces, and this is the potential we could do. We could unleash that nuclear genie, which we've done a pretty good job of kind of stuffing back into the bottle for the last 60 odd years. And now we're looking at unplugging that one again and letting it out. The issue being that we're standing on one side of that now. So, better hope that Russia gets utterly annihilated and can't send any nukes, but, it's essentially painting a target on our back. Anyway, neither here nor there. And the other part of this is obviously any time that anything's getting sent into the Ukraine, it's exacerbating the war there, which I'm not a fan of. All right, World Bank has put out an update of their food security. It's a response to rising food insecurity. Domestic food price inflation remains high around the world. Information from the latest month between January and April, for which food price inflation data are available, shows high inflation in most low to middle income countries. This is pretty important. This is not Australia. We're not a middle income country. We're a high income country. Doesn't feel like it, I know, for a lot of average Australians, but we're actually richer than most of the world here. Low and middle income countries, food inflation is increasing. And I've talked about this, I guess, ad nauseum at this point, but ever since the war in Ukraine kicked off, and looking at the shutdown of one of the biggest bread baskets in the world, And I said, hey, this is going to mean that maybe there's, instead of 5 packets of Wheat Bix, there's going to be 4. Maybe instead of 18 varieties of cereal, we're only going to get 16 or maybe even 15. But that's the consequence for us, which does actually get some Australians' noses out for some fucking reason. But the consequence to a place like Africa is wholesale death. This is starvation on a massive scale. This is low and middle income countries that are being affected. And I want to just name some of these countries so you can understand this. There's some pretty horrific stuff that's going on in the world right now. And from my perspective, it's almost non-existent in mainstream media. The mainstream media isn't really picking up on this, and I'm not sure why, because this certainly was a thing when I was growing up, like Africa dying, Ethiopians, like make sure you finish your food on your plate, send money to whatever it is, 40-hour famine, blah, blah, blah. All these efforts for average people to actually help out starving nations. And we're not actually seeing these nations starving on the media at all. So I'm not sure why it's being ignored, but I want to highlight some of these countries. Kieran says, $11 for 2 packets of chips in Coles I saw. I don't eat that crap, but yeah, food inflation, it's one of the points of this actually that was really interesting, and I do have the numbers here somewhere, but I won't go through all the numbers. It basically was talking about food inflation, and I'm like, those numbers that the World Bank is saying is actually higher than what our country is admitting to. And I've said this for a long time, that inflation data is like lies, essentially. It's fudged. They, tinker with it a little bit. I'll put it that way. Or you could say that they out and out lie about it, especially with things like CPI, where they take into factor rent prices that are based not on actual rent prices. They don't go to the market and go, what are rent prices? They go to a couple of homeowners who rent their places out, or sometimes don't, and say, what would you rent your place out for? And they go, oh, I don't know, $200. When in reality, I don't know where in Australia you could get a place for $200 a week, but like, $550, $800, $900, $1,500. These are sort of numbers that are actually getting shelled out to live in a place in Australia. So that's one of the ways they do it. They also muddle in there a whole heap of like one-off purchases, large screen TVs, cars, all this other sort of stuff that you don't buy regularly. You don't buy every week. You buy it every now and then. And those things have actually been coming down in price. As mass technology still buying up from China, blah, 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 or a whole heap of reasons. But that takes the CPI, that drags it down. So food's going up, but these things are coming back down or are staying the same. So it drags it back down to here. That's why I always say when they were reporting 8% inflation on CPI, I'm saying, no. Like, trust your own hip pocket here. It's 18%. 18% on a good day. All right, here's some of the countries. Biggest affected ones: Afghanistan, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, Yemen. Obviously, we've got a number of issues, in places like Somalia, South Sudan, Yemen, war-like activity. Afghanistan is actually, I would say, is relatively stable to how it's been for the last 2 decades. Nigeria as well, never known for being too solid. Haiti, Burkina Faso, Mali, these sorts of areas are having problems. They're the worst hit. So this is where food has increased the most. And I would argue that these places are probably the places where they're least able to deal with it as well. Increases in food. Kind of a perfect storm. All right, just whipping out a whole. That's the worst. I'll go through what they call phase 4, which is the next stage down, and then ones that are on the edge of going into being in a bad place. CAR, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Kenya, Myanmar, Pakistan, Syria are all very high concern. The next level down: Guatemala, Honduras, Malawi, El Salvador, Lebanon, Nicaragua. Like, there was no surprises in there really for me. I mean, Afghanistan was sort of a surprise for me, but The rest of them were no real surprise, and especially when we're thinking about places like, was Turkey in here? I thought Turkey was in there somewhere. I can't see it though. Lebanon, been hit with a lot of inflation recently as well. So really no surprise. A lot of these countries do not grow. They're not net, what would you call, exporters of food. They're net importers of food. So you can see that the global food supply, as these systems start to shake around and break down, that the ones who are on the margins already, are dropping off. And again, I'm just listing countries here, but there are individual people. There are mums and dads, there are kids, there are families who are starving to death because of these things that I'm talking about here. All right, let's hit closer to home now. And I got sent this one from a main source, and I said, that's very interesting because I actually experienced this the other day. Aldi, the German supermarket chain that Aussies love to go into, it's kind of, I would say, the main competitor to our top two supermarkets. You've got Woolworths and Coles, who dominate the market, and then Aldi's kind of come in and they're eating away at their market share. Aldi is turning off lights in all of its stores in an attempt to save money. So it wants to keep these lower prices. That's one of its big things. It's got lower prices for its consumers, and quite often it uses off-brand stuff, and got in a lot of trouble for that previously, for having these off-brand stuff and not allowing the on-brand stuff into their store. But they've sorted that out now. But they've kept their prices lower than the other supermarkets. But what they're doing now is actually turning off lights, which makes sense to me. Save a few bucks, virtue signal to everyone that you're eco-friendly. I actually had this happen to me. So I was in IKEA looking for a certain thing, a storage solution, versatile storage solution for modern living. And this announcement comes over. It's about 2 in the arvo. Announcement comes over: customers, please be aware, we're dimming all our lights for the next 3 hours. If you need any help, our friendly staff will be available for you. I was like, well, why are you dimming your lights? They didn't say why they were dimming their lights. And I figured it out. I'm like, there's probably a cost-saving thing and an eco-friendly thing, like, oh, virtue signal, look how great we are, we're dimming our lights. It was probably the least busy part of the day, I would guess, too. So they factored that in. All I could think about, though, was I walked past a couple of old people, and I'm like, I hope you can see well in the dark. Now, it wasn't actually that noticeable to me. It was noticeable in one part of the store. Like, as I got to the registers, I was like, yeah, it's pretty dark in here. As I was walking through other parts of the store, I didn't really notice it too much, but it definitely struck me as interesting. And I wondered if they're doing this everywhere, and why haven't I heard more about this? Well, now I have. This got sent through to me. So Aldi apparently is doing it as well. I would expect to see more of this sort of stuff. And again, tying into what I was talking about with South Africa, okay, it seems like a big stretch. I get that. It seems like this huge stretch. Like, we're here in Australia, we're fine. We're going to be okay. But this behavior is already coming in. It's just a bit of a warning. Hey, that's what this whole thing is about. This whole channel is about, is like, look, let's look at stuff and go, well, let's start to think about this. What's going to happen in the future? Can we prepare ourselves a little bit better? Can we deal without lights? What else we got? This one was a big one, and I'm not too sure about it. This is the Chinese setting up shop in Cuba. So Cuban Missile Crisis Part 2? I don't know. China and Cuba have reached a secret agreement. Newsflash: if it's in the news, it's not secret. And especially with China, if they've done something and it's out there and it's a secret agreement, they probably want you to know about it. Anyway, a secret agreement to establish an electronic eavesdropping facility on the island in a brash new geopolitical challenge by Beijing to the US. According to US officials familiar with the highly classified intelligence, an eavesdropping facility in Cuba, roughly 100 miles from Florida, would allow Chinese intelligence services to scoop up electric communications throughout the southeastern US. Think of all that redneck data that they're going to collect. Oh my God. Oh my God. Do rednecks even have phones? Do they even have electricity? I don't know. No, that's a lie. I've got a few friends who are rednecks and live in this area of the world as well. Lovely people, and I am only joking. And feel free to fire shots back at me if you feel offended. But I'm not here to not offend people. That's not really my goal. Really interesting thing from a couple of points. Like, let's look at this from the surface level for starters. Like, China spying on the US. Ooh, that's bad. Let's take the next sort of step out. China signaling again to the world, US power is not what a lot of people think it is. And I think this is what China is doing a lot. With a lot of these things that we see China doing, it's really like buzzing the tower with their, or buzzing that plane that they got pretty close to, one of the US spy planes, cutting off the US warship, which, I mean, despite it being blown up in the news, it was like, okay, that's, let's actually check reality here. That's not that big of a deal, all right? Getting in another ship's path, yeah, it's a dick act, but it's not like, oh, World War III. What it actually is the China is kind of like subtly slapping the US in the face at the moment and seeing what they do. Or what's the Aussie version of this? When you see two dickheads in a pub and one's like, like this, like trying to get the other guy to like flinch. That's what China's doing to the US right now. Fucking piece of this, man. Fucking go here. And the US sometimes is going like flinching, and other times is like a deer in the headlights, just doing nothing, just sort of staring off into space, like, which, if you think about their president, kind of makes sense, I think. What? What was that, China? So we're seeing that kind of degradation of world power, of world control that the US has classically had. And that has consequences for us all, especially Australia, because our cart is well and truly hooked onto the US. So as goes the US, so will go Australia. Be warned. So I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying this is a thing that I'm seeing. The other thing is that this was released by the US, like, we caught them. Look what China's doing. So that for me, when I read that this came from US intelligence, I was like, right, okay, this is more of the anti-China propaganda that we've come to see that is pouring out of the US. So always be aware of that. Always be aware of your sources. As far as I'm concerned, there are very few sources that are actually top-notch, that are great. Every source has its bias. Every source comes from somewhere. I don't block out sources because of that. I'm trying to get as wide a gamut or breadth of information as I can. So I'm reading everything I can. But just very interesting stuff that's going on there. And then at the end of the day, what can they actually get? That's debatable. That is debatable. I'm not a cybersecurity expert in any way, shape, or form, but setting up a spy shop, like this is more of an overt show than an actual spying activity. Because if China wanted to spy, they could do it much, much easier than setting up a base in Cuba. And in fact, I would say most likely are doing it in other ways than this. This is way too overt. It's way too in the news for it to be in any way effective. Don't buy into the scaremongering on that one. But do buy into the fact that this is another slap in the face to US power. All right, last one that I'll finish off with. NASA warns of internet apocalypse. A groundbreaking mission by NASA's Parker Solar Probe, the PSP, has successfully ventured through solar wind for the first time, aiming to prevent people on Earth being unable to get on the internet. Scientists have issued warnings about the potential impact of a solar storm, commonly referred to as an internet apocalypse, which could strike within the next decade. Thanks for the newsflash, NASA. Any of us folk who have been looking at any solar activity in any way for the past couple of years are well aware of this. Anyone who has heard the term CME or coronal mass ejection or solar flares are quite aware of this. Anyone who has heard of the term Carrington event before are quite aware of this. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then I implore you to go look that up. Go look up CME, go look up solar flares, go look up Carrington event, or go onto a YouTube channel called Suspicious Observers. And there is abundant information, scientific information. Somebody who pours through things like the data coming out of the various sources that we have on solar activity and through peer-reviewed journal articles and synthesizes that in usually a 2-minute video every day, which is fantastic. Also makes really, really great videos. Some of it is a bit doom and gloom, but again, it's not doom and gloom for the reason of scaring the shit out of you. It's doom and gloom for the reason of, hey, this is something you might want to think about. This is something you might want to wrap your head around. Every 6,000 to 12,000 years, there is a massive event on Earth that has to do with the sun that causes catastrophe. Every maybe 150 to 200 years, there is a huge coronal mass ejection that would affect all electronics on Earth. The last one happened was called the Carrington event. And the only reason we were not all freaked out about it is that when it hit Earth, we weren't really using electricity that much. So some telegram wires were, and I'm not talking about the app, telegraph wires, sorry, were wiped out. It was like people were like, oh, that's weird. Oh, we can see the northern lights. We don't usually see the northern lights down here. That's weird. Oh well, on with our lives. Light the little lanterns, and off we go. If it would happen today, like I was talking about at the start of today's SitRep, it would be utterly catastrophic to our life. People, we cannot live without electricity anymore. It's just a fact of life. Most human beings in our countries cannot live without electricity. If an EMP hit, the kind that would destroy electric systems, would take out grids, then we would see a die-off of epic proportions. Anyway, I am going to... Miss Renee D at 76 says, with the Carrington event, the aurora was as far down as Hawaii. So you can imagine that. Also, on top of that, CMEs coming in and all that sort of stuff. We're also in the, perhaps in the midst of a polar shift. Our poles are moving at an increasing rate at the moment. They have moved more, I think, in the last 12 months than they have the previous, I want to say 12 years, maybe. And I think I'm right on that. Be more sure of yourself. But yeah, go check out Suspicious Observers on YouTube. Fantastic channel, and they have all the information on there. I can't memorize it. All right, that's it for today, gang. Thank you very much for joining me. Apologies that I haven't got one out in a little minute. You can hear my voice. It's already fading as we speak, and I'm starting to cough a little bit more and more. But I am on the mend. I'm doing well, getting better. So hopefully I'll put more of these out. I'm traveling the rest of this week, so we'll see how we go. Thanks heaps for joining me, though. I really appreciate it. I hope you're all still prepping. I hope you're still getting those food stores built up, doing the little thing day by day. The world could end tomorrow. I don't think it will end tomorrow. I think, things are going to get tougher, and that's what I'm planning for. Also, if the world does go topsy-turvy tomorrow, I'm prepared for that. I've got a big axe on the wall. So, as always, keep prepping, keep those food stores up, keep gardening if you can, keep trying to build the systems of resiliency into your own lives, and keep encouraging others to do so as well. This is not a competition. We're not trying to out prep each other. We're here to help each other out, and just a reminder of that, because there's been some stuff that I've seen recently where I'm like, oh, come on, man, like we're all in this together. And even the people who aren't prepping, like that's part of prepping, is starting to think about that, starting to convert them to our thoughts. Getting you one of us. But even just if people aren't going to prepare, and there are people who will not prepare, maybe start to think, if I've got my shit sorted, can I start to get a little bit more sorted so I can help those people out when they're going to need it? Anyway, Take the Ride says, are you still having new crop circles in Australia? Southern England is getting quite a few still. They are huge and gorgeous. I have not heard anything, Take the Ride, about any crop circles in Australia. If anyone's got any information on crop circles, please send them through to me on Instagram or send me a message on YouTube, although I check the YouTube stuff very infrequently. But I will try and keep an eye out for that. Interesting stuff, though. Always love a good alien tie-in, because they're coming, I'm sure. A lot of stuff released recently about UFOs. All right, I've got to go, gang. Thank you very much. As I was saying, stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open. Keep prepping. And until next time, Semper Paratus.